as we think about this challenge, how have MSL teams successfully overcome the void of in-person KOL engagements? Can you give us your thoughts on this first?
Thanks, Samuel. And before I start, I just want to put a quick disclaimer out there that my opinions that I state are mine only, and they're not necessarily those of Novartis. So after the disclaimer, so we've come a long way this past year with the utilization of technology. It's something that we've seen different MSL teams utilizing more technology than others, and I think this year, with a pandemic, we've expedited the use or more use of technology. So it's a mind shift change for both organizations as well as the individual MSLs that are in the territory. So looking at the different platforms that are out there, it's important to really, get to know the platforms that are out there and utilize the platforms that are convenient for the HCPs and are allowed by their institutions. As we saw, there's institutions that may not necessarily allow MS Teams, or they may not allow Zoom, but it's being flexible and having that the knowledge of those platforms and being able to utilize those platforms to their fullest extent. And we've seen that throughout their regular engagements with HCPs, as well as even looking at the virtual engagements outside of that regular engagement and going into congresses. So it's basically utilizing the technology to the fullest, and then as you're utilizing these platforms, is feeling comfortable with the platforms and engaging HCPs in those discussions that provide value to them and also provide value to the organization. So what technology has allowed us to do is to become more efficient and really connect the HCPs with different people within the organization. And one of the things that I think is important is when we're having these discussions with HCPs, in order to maintain that engagement with our platforms, is to really understand what their needs are and what their wants are. Sometimes we have physicians that may be interested in clinical trials. Others may be interested in other topics such as survivorship or diversity in clinical trials, or even policy. So making sure that we can connect them with other people within the organization, I found that would be important. So that's kind of an overview or kind of my feedback on that question, Samuel.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent points, Julio. I'm going to come back to a couple things that you said I think are particularly noteworthy. Nicole, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so just picking up on Julio's theme of technology, I think that we can all give a huge shout out to the platforms out there that, had to shift and adjust the way that the MSL teams did as well. So I just want to mention something about congresses that Julio said. In the beginning of the pandemic, when the congresses were either canceled or they went virtual, the MSLs were really feeling this void of face-to-face interactions with KOLs at the conferences in particular. So some adjustments had to be made. And I think, just again, picking up with these platforms, something like a virtual medical affairs booth that allows for meeting rooms that MSLs can use to answer unsolicited questions or set up meetings during the conference. It doesn't completely replace face-to-face, but it allows the MSLs to act similarly as they would if they were at the conference. In addition to that, proactively engaging KOLs ahead of the conference or the meeting to discuss posters or sessions of interest could be hugely impactful, since much of the virtual conferences have pre-recorded sessions, so that timing element isn't there as much with these virtual platforms. And then just real quick, something else that Julio said related to these platforms. So a lot of what the MSLs do are they educate, right? And we've seen emergence of these asynchronous learning platforms like Gathered, which is a platform that we've become familiar with, and they allow for the education of groups and series to be managed by the MSLs. So these can also be utilized to help overcome that void of in-person by maintaining organization in a virtual space.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I like that as well, Nicole. There's a couple things that you'd mentioned I want to come back to. Before I do that, Bruno, any thoughts on this in terms of the companies that you guys are engaging with on what you've seen, how MSL teams have successfully overcome that void of in-person KOL engagements?
I think, Samuel, the term void is exactly the right one. And it's actually a big void to start with, in my opinion. I agree with what Nicole and Julio said. Our company has been virtual for 16 years. So we used to working remotely and not meeting with the people we're building relationship with. But in the KOL world, it is, in the MSL work, this is a new situation. And I think it's important to recognize that it's a real different way of building relationship, and that the relationship is not the same when you cannot, at least from time to time, meet in person. And it's going to be interesting to see whether that lasts and how long that lasts. But I think we all agree that something will change moving forward. And so we're going to talk about, I'm sure, a few practical ways to deal with that void. But the first point for me is to recognize that it is real and that human relationships are not built the same way over Zoom that as opposed to in person. There's something different about the way to relate to someone and build trust and build a rapport. And it's a real void. So I think the title, the theme is a real one and a very important one for the MSL community.